Strength Training with the Master. This is my newest series on strength training, resistance training, using resistance training to build strength. This runs parallel with my other series, Physique Development for Hard Gainers. So for those of you guys that are skinny ectomorphs and you're having trouble bulking up, you want to look good for the girls, and that's not an easy thing to do if you're born with a genetic predisposition to be thin and weak. That's called bad luck. It sucks. It's much better to be a mesomorph or an endomorph, but being an ectomorph, that's the hard gainer. You have to fight like hell just to look halfway decent. I'm putting together a whole series of information to help you on that path. In this video, I'm going to discuss the barbell seated good morning. I first came to know about the seated good morning through Knees Over Toes guy, who I strongly recommend his YouTube channel. I learned a lot from this guy. I bought his course, and he's all about how to bulletproof your knees, but he goes into other things as well. And the seated good morning, I learned it from him.
I learned it by watching you.
Is a phenomenal exercise that I personally like for a lot of different reasons. It gives me a way to strengthen my lower back without overloading my entire physiology and developing too much muscle fatigue. I do rack pulls, heavy rack pulls, every other week. So the weeks that I'm not doing the heavy rack pulls, I do the barbell seated good mornings. When you're doing like a heavy rack pull, 400 plus pounds, or heavy deadlifts, 400 plus pounds, it takes a toll on your overall recovery system. And I found that doing these good mornings, I'm able to get stronger, I'm able to target my lower back in a safe way, and it gives me a rest from the heavy work of the rack pulls. It's very important to understand that programming is different for every individual. I learned a lot from watching Mark Bell. I think he's a great guy. I love his brother's documentary, Chris Bell. He did a documentary called Bigger, Stronger, Faster. It's my favorite documentary in the whole world. In one of his videos, he talked about how important it is to learn what works for you. He was discussing it, I think, with Silent Mike or someone, and he was saying it takes basically like 10 years just to start to figure out what works for you. And so that to me is a clue. And I figured out that this works really well for me. This combination, I'm very happy with it. Rack pulls one week, seated good mornings the next week. I recommend you give it a shot. If you feel like that makes sense to you, give it a shot. You could say in a way that this is a deadlift assistance exercise, but that is if you're a power lifter, because the main goal then is to get your deadlift up. So anything that supports that goal is now recognized as an assistance exercise. But really, this is just an exercise. It's good in its own right, whether you do rack pulls or not, whether you do deadlifts or not. This is a hip hinge exercise. It targets the hamstrings and the spinal erector really well. I want to talk about standing good mornings versus seated good mornings. I experimented doing standing good mornings with trepidation because I know that's how Bruce Lee injured his back. He took 135 pounds, which is essentially his weight. So imagine taking your entire body weight, loading it up on your back, and going into standing good mornings. And doing so without adequately warming up. Warming up for any type of good morning exercise, whether it's seated or standing, cannot be overemphasized. All right, so I see a lot of different setups for how people do these seated barbell good mornings. A lot of people, they just take the bar off the rack, they walk around with it, sit down somewhere and start doing them. I think that's foolish. I use pretty heavy weight with this. I'm aiming to do full body weight seated good mornings, so I'm about 200 pounds, so I would be putting 200 pounds on this bar and doing that for maybe 4 or 5 reps is my goal, and I might decide to go past that. Walking around with that weight and then sitting down and then standing up and re-racking it, it's a lot of work, and you can potentially get injured. It's important to know that a lot of people that get injured working with very heavy weights when they're squatting and things like this is actually when they're unracking or racking the weight, or especially if they're turning from one side to the other for whatever reason, which you shouldn't be doing. This exercise is a hip hinge exercise. There's no reason for me to be turning to the left or to the right or anything like that. When you're tight, and you're super tight and you're prepared properly, and you do the Valsalva breathing technique, which you should all know and certainly be applying when you're doing a seated good morning. My suspicion is that Bruce Lee was not using the Valsalva technique when he injured his back, because if he was, he probably would have not injured his back. And Bruce Lee is a phenomenal athlete, so I'm quite confident that he was using good form. It's just he didn't do the warm-ups, and it didn't go his way that day. And I feel much safer doing the seated good mornings. The closer your feet get to your butt, the less of a stretch you're going to feel in your hamstrings. So when I'm using lighter weight, I like to extend my legs, almost knees fully locked out, to give me a really nice stretch in the hamstring. My warm-ups are just as much about getting my body prepared for the heavier weight as it is in getting a good stretch in my hamstrings. I set the bar exactly where I want it to be. It's really easy to re-rack the weight. I find this to be much safer. Once I unrack the weight, I simply move forward a little bit so these things don't get in my way. And now I'm going to go chest to bench. I'm going to go all the way down. As you can see, there's a crevice over here between this is an incline bench. I make it so my chin goes in this crevice over here, and this allows me to get my chest against the bench and enables me to get full range of motion in a very safe way. So if for whatever reason I fail at the bottom, I could just dump the weight to the right or to the left. It's not as easy to do that when you're doing a standing good morning. I'll even do the Valsalva technique with just the bar on my back. Because when you're doing your warm-ups, you're also practicing the form that you want to be using in your actual work sets. So it behooves you to handle every warm-up set as if it was a heavy set. Alright, so the main thing with this whole seated good morning, you must do the Valsalva technique. It's critical. You want to get as much air as you can in through your nose, in through your mouth. Get that air deep down into your diaphragm. Push the air out in all directions. Brace your core. Create that intra-abdominal pressure. You're going to need it. Not only is it going to allow you to lift heavier weight, but more importantly, it's going to keep you safe. So do not, I repeat, do not do any good morning until you have a good working concept of the Valsalva technique.